And just to note, remember the thalamus in the brain, that's where things first go, sensory input first goes, and then it gets routed to different areas of the brain. That's true for all senses except smell. So smell doesn't actually go to the thalamus. It just goes directly to processing in the temporal lobe. All right. So let's look at what's going on with smell. Odor molecules are called odorants, and those are the things that are entering our nose and binding to specific receptor sites. That's really at the top of our nose. We have some mucous membrane, so that's where the binding happens. Okay. And those chemical changes that are happening when things bind directly to the receptor sites are then transmitted to up here, right, that's the top of our nose where we have our olfactory bulb. And then that gets information relayed to the primary olfactory cortex in our brain, in the temporal lobe, and the limbic system and various places to tell us what to do with that information. Okay. All right, so pretty short and sweet. I just have one slide on smell. We spent the most time talking about vision and hearing. We tend to rely a lot more on those in terms of our everyday life, but these are incredibly important. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about taste, gustation. All right, so there are also specific molecules related to taste. These are called tastins. And again, we have chemical senses going on, so they're binding directly to places on the tongue, receptor sites on the tongue, and they're causing chemical changes when they do that. Here, a little could be distraction for those. If we're talking about taste buds, those are groupings of receptor cells. And that's what's actually transmitting information to nerves, right? Getting into electrical information that our brain can understand. Okay, taste buds don't last forever. They actually have a pretty short life cycle. So 10 days to 2 weeks, that means that we can kind of quickly get used to things, for good or for bad. We can really change kind of our preferences in a pretty short amount of time. We can start over if we like. Okay. All right. And if you're looking, a lot of people think that like the little white spots on your tongue are the taste buds themselves. They're actually not. That's the papilla that we're seeing. So the taste buds are like the tiny little things we actually can't see kind of on the top of those papillas. And you can see in this image here, like here's the nerve fibers that are communicating to other places in your brain. All right, so how many different tasting groups are there? Well, scientists don't really agree. These are pretty much agreed upon, but others have added like suggestions for maybe strictly metallic taste, like if you taste blood, for example. That's not included on here, but scientists have hypothesized about that one. These are the ones that are generally agreed upon. And something to note is they are not specific to one place on your tongue. So for all of these listed here, right, there are multiple places where you'd be able to experience that sensation of sweet, sour, salty, or bitter. The only exception really is bitter, so there's a lot more receptor sites in the back of our tongue for bitter. Anyone want to guess why that might be evolutionarily adaptive? Yeah, I'll come back to you, Emily, because I know you get to guess a lot. Go ahead.
Because like sometimes bitter things are poisonous.
Sometimes
Bitter things are like poison.
Okay, so what would that mean, like for our survival?
Like by having it taste bad, we wouldn't want to eat it.
Yeah, so especially as it's like almost going to be going down our throat, we're going to consume it and eat it. if it tastes really bad to us, we might spit it out or like have some kind of gag reflex or like gross. We wouldn't want that in our body if it was poisonous or harmful to us. Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. So these are some you might not be as familiar with as others. We do have one specifically for umami or like mouthfeel in terms of savory. We have one specifically for fatty content, and that's one of the newer ones that scientists are talking about. But all of these have a potential evolutionary reason for why we would either prefer them or want to avoid them. It's actually why we as humans prefer like kind of fatty and sweet. Usually that indicates a lot of calories, and in times in human history when there wasn't a lot of food available, right, we prefer those foods so we can get as much calories as we can for the times that we wouldn't have those calories. Okay. All right. Okay. So we talked about smell, we talked about taste separately, but actually they really work together a lot, and that's where we get flavor from. So flavor is a sensory integration. It's a lot of things coming together, not only including smell and taste, but also texture of foods, also temperature, and even the appearance, how things look. How many people, this is true for me, like my food tastes better when it's hot and like temperature hot, like really hot compared to if it's just like room temperature or cold. Anyone else have that? Yeah, I have to have it like really hot. It has to be immediately right before I eat it, heat it up. So it all plays into how we're experiencing that food. Okay, so here's where you have the piece of candy for. We're gonna be demonstrating the mouth-nose connection. Okay. So we know that part of how we experience flavor is through our sense of smell. So what I hope will happen is you'll have a different experience for the first bite of the candy you have compared to the second bite. Or you can do this with any food you have with you right now if you don't want to use the candy. Okay, so for the first bite, what I'd like you to do is like plug your nose and eat that first bite. So you're basically eliminating the odorants, right, from binding to your receptor cells and telling you about that for flavor. Okay. For the second bite, after you've experienced that, go ahead and unplug your nose and just eat it as normal. Just kind of notice the sensations that are going on. So it's the exact same piece of food, just your sense of smell is being blocked while you're doing it. Did anyone notice any difference whatsoever? Yeah, you want to share about it?
I couldn't taste anything at first, and then when I'm breathing, I can taste it.
Okay, yeah, so breathing is getting all that mixture of the smell of the candy as well as tasting it at the same time. We've been talking about all of these in isolation, but in real world, many are working together. Yeah, and hopefully that enhanced your experience when you started breathing. Yeah. Okay. Anyone have a different or want to expand on that?
It was definitely sweeter when I was smelling it, but also I noticed like it almost tasted more plasticky. Like it didn't really taste like I could still taste it, but it just kind of the texture of it is so weird, and that's what my brain is focusing on.
Ah, so kind of zoomed in on the texture part of it without.
So that kind of made me feel like it tasted a little like plastic.
Okay, so that kind of maybe like took away from the experience a little bit.
I feel like it was more sour when my nose was not plugged.
Okay.
Like when my nose was plugged, it tastes sour.
so you got more of the sour sensation. Right. We could have done this also with, like, if I asked you to kind of blindly choose a flavor and not look at it, because even the color of the candy will influence how you are tasting it, what the flavor is, right? So if we, especially if it's like a lime green, what do we associate that with? Usually sour apple or like a more sour grape or something like that. Yeah, so that'll already prime us to experience that. That's more part of the perception, right? Because we're using what we know about the world to enhance our experience. Yeah. If you ever know Runts, do y'all know Runts, the candy? Yeah. It's like little fruit shapes, hard candy. Does anyone know like the banana one? Okay. But do you think that one actually tastes like banana? You had to like, I don't think it does, but it's yellow, it's banana shaped. So you're using your perception. What do you think?
Fun fact, it actually is supposed to taste like banana, but the species of banana is supposed to taste like now.
That's so interesting. So it's wow. So we're tasting an extinct banana. That's so interesting. Yeah, we've really messed with the banana a lot throughout time. Okay. All right. So another thing that's kind of closely related is, it's not in here, but time. Like if you take the time to slowly eat something and like savor it, that can change your whole experience rather than just like gobbling it down as fast as you can, right? All right. We're gonna come back to more about taste, like what happens with spicy foods when we get to perception. Oh wait, it's up next. It's here. Okay. All right. So we just talked about smell and taste. Now there's a broad category related to somatic sensory experiences. And this is the one I said we're not going to cover all of them, but just so you know, there are many different factors related to somatic or related to how our body experiences things, right? Related to our balance, where we are body position in relation to the environment, the world, how we're moving, how we're feeling pain, how we're feeling temperature. Those are all somatic senses. Touch is probably the most well-known of the somatic senses. Okay. And what do we have? What is this thing right here that's going around? Anyone remember? What area of the brain are we talking about? What lobe? You got quizzed on this a lot. What lobe is somatosensory cortex in? Parietal. Yes. Sensory strip. Good. Okay. All right. So here's some of the things, touch included, but related to our skin that we can experience as sensory information, right? We experience pressure, so how firm we're pressing against something or something else is pressing against us. Temperature is included, wherever we touch something, feel how hot or cold it is. Pain is included here, especially like the more sensitive areas of our body and skin. And then we have special senses to detect vibration. I think there was a question related to that last time, so that does fall under the somatic sense. Okay. All right, and the word proprioception, if you're not familiar with it, again, it's looking at our body's position and movement in the world. So we receive sensory information pretty much all the time that's telling us about where we are in the world. If we're interacting with things in the world, right, we're getting more of that tactile. All right, how many people like spicy food? Yeah? Okay, so spicy is not a taste or a flavor, it's actually a form of pain sensation. So it's an ouchie. So we have pain receptors, and these are the things that are being activated when we eat spicy foods. they are these free nerve endings that we have, and there's specific chemicals that are in the food that we're eating, right, that are filling those receptor sites. Capsaicin, okay, it's kind of one of the big ones. Okay. That's probably the best example of like just eating spicy foods, but there are other examples. So when you're cutting onions, for example, that's a pain response when you start crying because of that, right? There's receptors, there's things in the environment that are going on leading to you to cry. If you use mouthwash and you're swishing it around in your mouth, right, and it's like, you might describe it as a little bit hot or like spicy, or it's having these certain sensations, it's related back to pain. I guess people describe it different ways. You could say that's like a coolness sensation, right? Okay. All right. So, yeah, eating spicy food, causing yourself pain. All right. A little bit more about touch. It goes much more into detail in your textbook, but kind of the basics of what I'd like you to know related to touch and different stimuli are exactly that, what I mentioned before, the pressure, whether it's kind of light or heavy, whether it's transient or persistent over time, and then the frequency of vibrations also can be detected as a form of touch. Stretch as well. So these are all just different areas of how we experience touch. Lots going on. Really complex. It's not spending too much time. In one of our, I think it was Wednesday seminar, we talked a little bit about phantom limbs. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. It's possible that if someone loses a limb, right, that body part is no longer there, but may still somehow, right, get that area of the brain may get activated. So it's kind of a result of memory or something that used to be there, and it can be really difficult for people if they're feeling pain there, they're not able to massage it because their limb is no longer there, or if they're experiencing an itch or other somatosensory experience, right? I have a video that I'll show you kind of to explain it, and then I do want to read this quote.
Limb is just like any other limb that you would feel, except it isn't actually there. Phantom sensations are feeling body parts like arms or hands that aren't on your body. This sounds crazy, and it kind of is, but 60 to 80% of people who have lost a limb report phantom feelings throughout their life, most of which are painful. And almost 100% of people report phantom sensations immediately after having lost a limb. So how does this happen? Well, first we have to understand how we normally feel things. Every body part is connected to specific neurons in the brain. When you detect a physical stimulus, when you're touched, that body part immediately sends a signal to its corresponding neurons in the brain. And when that signal is interpreted by the brain, that's when you actually feel the stimulus. But when you lose a limb, no sensation is given to this part of the brain anymore because there's no limb to be touched. It turns out that when neurons in the brain are really inactive for a long time, the neighboring regions want to expand and fill that void. So what happens next is a sort of reorganization of the brain's neural connections. The active regions that are being touched and stimulated literally start to take over the inactive regions. This process is called neuroplasticity, and until very recently, most people assumed this wasn't possible, that our brains were permanently hardwired and unchangeable. But we now know that the connections are malleable, plastic. Okay, so neighboring neurons have moved into that region, but now what? Let's assume we lost an arm, and the corresponding neurons in the brain eventually become inactive. We know that the neural region closest to this contains the face, so the face's neurons eventually move into the region that before stimulated the arm. This means that whenever certain parts of the face are touched, we would experience that sensation not just in our face, but in our phantom limb too. Here you can see a picture of scientists diagramming where parts of the hand and arm are on someone's face. And similarly, if someone lost only their lower arm, it's likely that the neurons of their upper arm would expand and start to feel that lower arm too. This theory, that experiencing phantom limbs is due to the reorganization of neural connections, is largely derived from the work of psychologist Vilayendra Ramachandran. And he also believes that every human has a neural template from birth, describing how the body is supposed to be connected to itself. He worked with one particular woman who had lost her hand in a car accident, but this woman was actually born with 4 fingers on the hand she lost. Despite this, Ramachandran was able to help her feel 5 phantom fingers even though she had only ever had 4. That blows my mind. Now, despite the explanation I just gave you, there is still debate over the exact reasons that phantom limbs are felt. Some argue that the reorganization of neurons isn't as important, or that it only explains why people experience pain and not normal sensation. Even Ramachandran says that while it may be an important component, we can't be sure that it is the only or most important reason. Another study found that injecting anesthesia into nerves found in our backs, not our brains, helped light phantom pain. Overall, this research is incomplete, and there is still much to learn. But I'm sure we'll keep discovering and understanding crazy, awesome things about our world.
Alright. And just to, neuroplasticity, we talked about that, right? And just to read this quote, one person said of their experience, "I've been missing my left leg below the knee for years now. When I'm laying in bed with the covers on, I could feel the leg as if it were still there in my mind. And sometimes I'm hit with spasms of pain in both feet at the same time. I can massage away the pain in my attached right foot, but the pain goes on in my missing left foot." So phantom pain is quite real and apparently untreatable. Sometimes on long walks, I feel pain in my left foot, and rubbing my prosthesis actually does some good if I watch my foot while I rub it. If I'm not looking, it doesn't do any good. Okay, so that's one way that person dealt with it. There's also something called mirror therapy, where you can put up a mirror next to the limb that you do have, and the sensations kind of, if you're looking at it, mimic what you would do in this case of a prosthetic. So it could potentially lead to scratching that itch or like massaging away that pain with mirror therapy. Right. Okay, so the last part of our lecture is on perception. We spent a lot of time on sensation. Really hard to separate the two, so even in that sensation part, there probably was a lot of perception involved in there. But let's get more specific about perception. Remember, it needs a certain aspect of cognition or thoughts, interpretation in order to perceive something. So it's an active process that we all do. The first thing to understand about perception is kind of our ability to notice differences. There's a phenomenon called the just noticeable difference, or the JND, or difference threshold. It is really looking at the smallest detectable change that we could potentially make. So, we're getting the sensations, but can we perceive that something might be different than something else? It depends. It's going to depend on the environment, right? If you are in a movie theater and someone puts on their phone screen, like it's going to be really bright. You're probably going to perceive that even if it's like very far away. But if you're outdoors in a very bright light, right, it might not be the same. It might be more difficult to detect. Okay, so here we're looking at, technically the definition is like you would perceive it at least 50% of the time for the difference threshold. A good example is looking at these differences in light bulb, right? Some of them you can tell they're very different from one another, but probably these around here look pretty similar, especially these two. So your ability to differentiate might not be until you see this one and say, okay, that's different from that, whereas like this one, I can't really see any difference between these two ones. Depends on the environment and the stimulus intensity. Just like you experienced with the tasting, right, with flavor, most of our experiences are multimodal, meaning that we use multiple senses to experience things. This goes on without us even knowing. So it's really hard actually to isolate something because it's happening all the time at the same time. There are two different effects I want to talk about. So one is called the super additive effect of multisensory integration. It's a mouthful. Multisensory enhancement. Basically, it's this idea that, especially in certain environments, when we have multiple things working together, that is greater than the sum of each individual effect. Okay, so we're using like all the potential cues that we can to understand like what is being said or what is being communicated to us. The example here, like if you are at a really loud concert and someone, even though they're right next to you, they're trying to talk to you, right? So you might not be able to actually hear what they're saying, but you could use other cues, right? You could look at what their mouth is doing, you could look at like their body kind of language and the expressions that their face is making to interpret more or less what they're saying, right? So you, in that case, you need all of those senses working together in a multimodal way. However, if you were in a quiet coffee shop, right, you probably wouldn't need, I mean, that's all helpful, but you can hear them just fine. So you're primarily then relying on hearing to see what they're saying. And that's the principle of inverse effectiveness. So in that particular environment, we wouldn't need all of that kind of additional information and really focusing on all the other sensory information to know what's happening. We would have one sense that's kind of dominating and more important than the others. Okay. Some other examples of multimodal perception. Just how important visual cues or vision is to us as humans. You probably know this if you like interact with any other animals, like they might not use vision or rely on vision in the same way that we do as humans, right? They might rely much more on their sense of smell, for example, like dogs. Okay, but for humans, that's kind of the predominant sense in a lot of cases. So it's this idea that we first kind of taste things maybe with our eyes, because that's the first thing before we put it in our mouths, before we smell it, we may see it. Okay, so this visual cue could override the other senses, at least initially, right? Okay, so this here is a piece of, it's chicken, in case you can't tell, but it's in this flavor, I mean, it's in a color that's really strange, which is blue, right? Does anyone, it certainly is for me, like feel a little bit queasy or like it just doesn't feel quite right when you look at that image? Yeah, so what do you think your eyes or your body's trying to tell you in that case? Maybe thinking back to that evolutionarily adaptive response, yeah.
That it might not be safe to eat.
Yeah, going back to like same with that bitter kind of sensation. That color blue actually brings about a sense of disgust for a lot of people in terms of food. Can someone think of another color that might be similar?
Purple or like a crimson red or gray.
Yeah.
Just mold potentiality.
Yeah, green is another one. I think we'll see an example.
I was gonna say green, but then I was like immediately thought of like green foods that are good for you.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I can't say that one. Something that is green that is not supposed to be green.
Yeah, I will not eat your green eggs in the hand.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so I really wish these little candies I got were the mystery flavor ones, because that would have been an even better experiment for you all. Because for some people, it's really hard to identify, especially if it's like an artificial thing. It's not in the shape of the fruit, or it's natural state. Like to identify what the flavor actually is without the visual cues, right? Without it saying what the flavor is, without the color, what you think it'll taste like. Has anyone had that experience where they're like trying to identify which one it is, and they're like, I can't tell. I need that other information. Maybe. I'm pretty bad at it if I try to guess. It just like everything tastes like dairy. Yeah.
Is this the same thing like velvet cupcakes? Like how they're basically just chocolate, but people add like the red dye and suddenly
Yeah.
you perceive it as
Yeah.
delicious.
I agree. I think there are many people, if you didn't tell them it was chocolate, they might not know that it's basically just like devil's food cake or something. Yeah, it's true. It is true. That's a good example. Okay, so I'll read this quote. It's talking about how visual cues have this again as precedents, and they can set up expectations about what we think we're going to taste and what the flavor will be. And then that's basically priming. We call it priming in psychology. And it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We have these expectations and it influences how we actually have the experience. Okay. So foods looking appetizing plays a role in how they actually taste to us, how motivated we are to actually taste it. Okay. I have so many videos, but I'll show them if we have time. Okay, gotta get through the slides. Another example of multimodal perception is the McGurk effect. So I will show you the video on this one because it matters. It's a perceptual illusion, and what's happening is you are listening to something and you're also seeing the mouth move in a particular way that's giving you clues about what is actually being said. Okay, so if researchers artificially put like the wrong mouth movement with the same sound, you'll actually hear it different than if it had the correct mouth movement. Okay, so it's kind of showing how the brain is using vision and hearing together to perceive speech, right? It's not all about what we hear, it's also about what we see. Okay, let's look at a little clip from this 2 or 3 minute clip, I think.
In one moment, we are being bombarded by sensory information. Our brains do a remarkable job of making sense of it all. It seems easy enough to separate the sounds we hear from the sights we see. But there is one illusion that reveals this isn't always the case.
Ba, ba, ba,
Have a look at this.
ba,
What do you hear?
ba, 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 ba,
But look what happens when we change the picture.
ba, 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 ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed.
Okay, I turned off the captions because it will spoil it. What did you hear the second time? Ba with the F? Yeah, so the mouth movement made that happen.
In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba,
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
ba,
Take another look.
ba,
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
ba,
Now to the left of the screen.
ba,
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
ba. In the illusion, what we see overrides what we hear. So the mouth movements we see as we look at a face can actually influence what we believe we're hearing. If we close our eyes, we actually hear the sound as it is. If we open our eyes, we actually see how the mouth movements can influence what we're hearing. Ba, ba, ba.
It's a bizarre effect. Remember, the only sound you're hearing is ba with a B.
Ba, 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 ba.
Just those sounds many, many, many more times when we hear. Yeah, so that's one illusion. I want to talk about another illusion here on the same slide. It's called the rubber hand illusion. So what they do is they have people come in with their real hands, their real arms and hands here. They also have a rubber hand, and they put a separation in between them. So what's happening is your brain is kind of now looking at this hand and thinking that it's your hand, because your hand is kind of covered, right? You can't see your own hand. And they do these like sensations, like taking the paintbrush and like kind of stroking the hand. And then they do something to hurt the rubber hand. But because your brain is kind of thinking this is your real hand, you'll experience a very strange like sensation, like pain or some pressure or something like that, even though it's not actually touching your real hand. So just kind of showing how your brain can be pretty easily fooled by visual effects. Okay, and I have a short video for that one too. I think it's the same psychologist.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Right.
Very nice to meet you, Edie. We're going to do a little demonstration here called the rubber hand illusion. It's going to be a little
This
scary.
illusion may look like fairground fun, but it reveals one of the most important new ideas in brain science.
Right there. Good. And can you put this hand down right over here and just curl it up like the rubber hand's curled up a little bit? All right. Now, what I'm going to do is try to position the rubber hand so it looks like it's your own. Okay, could you imagine that being your own hand, kinda? Yeah. What we're gonna do is we're going to stroke your fingers simultaneously, the rubber finger and your real finger, and hopefully this will convince you that the rubber hand is your own, that your brain will actually adopt this hand.
In the illusion, simply watching the rubber hand being stroked at the same time as the real hand is enough to trick the brain into adopting it as its own.
We like weird. And slowly but surely, you should feel that the hand you're looking at is actually part of your body.
Feels like you're touching my hair with down.
Right, so it feels like this is your hand that I'm touching, right?
Yes.
You okay?
Yeah.
Good. Try that at home with your kids. Yeah. The rubber hand illusion is a wonderful example of how multisensory perception can influence how we perceive our own body. I mean, that's how deep multisensory perception runs. When you hold your hand out, it's generally thought that you know it's there because of the information you're getting from your muscles and your tendons and that sort of thing. But what the rubber hand illusion does is show how that can be overwritten by visual information. Okay,
The rubber
here comes your fun
hand
surprise.
shows the powerful connection between what we see and what we feel. But it reveals even more than simply the way our senses are connected. It hints that a fundamental change in the brain is taking place.
Oh!
Isn't that strange?
Yeah, that's creepy.
So what might be going on in the rubber hand illusion is that the brain is actually changing to accommodate the new rubber hand, going through some sort of, structural change that we call neuroplasticity.
Lots of different examples. Okay. So sensation and perception wouldn't be complete with just all of these different illusions, showing how we don't see the world as it is, right? We're interpreting it using all the cues that we know about death, right? Our experiences, what we've learned in the world. So optical illusions are another good example of this. There's kind of a couple of very famous ones. One is the Mueller-Lyer illusion. So these lines are actually the exact same length, but because it's anchored with the arrows either pointed in or out, right, this line looks shorter than this line. That's like just what our eyes perceive. It's taking the information we're getting about those lines and making it more than it actually is. The Ponzo illusion, we have these humans laying down are actually the same size, but because of the way the parallel lines are going, that perspective makes it look like the bodies are different sizes, right? So which one looks bigger to you? The one on the top or the bottom? The one on the top, yeah. And then there's a whole bunch of visual illusions around how we resolve ambiguity. So where it's a little bit ambiguous, we can interpret it different ways. sometimes your brain will switch between the different possibilities. Sometimes it just settles on one and it's very difficult to see the other options. Okay, so what do most people see when they look at this? Like, what's the first thing you might have seen? A girl, how old is the girl? Okay, a young woman is what people mostly see, where her face is like, you're kind of looking at the back and her face is away from you. Does anyone see something different?
Kind of see an old lady.
Okay, the old lady is the other thing that you might see. If you don't see it, her necklace, the choker, is actually the old lady's mouth, and the young lady's ear is actually the old lady's eye. So it's kind of like a face pointed like downward like that. Yes, so you might have seen this. There's so many of these. There's this one where depending on how far away the image is, it either looks like Marilyn Monroe or Albert Einstein, and your eyes may switch in between what you see there. Okay, again, these are kind of hard on a big screen. They usually work better if it's like on a phone or laptop.
I take my glasses off and I can see Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah.
Your vision.
So, like, from here, when I look at it, that one looks like Einstein and that one looks like Marilyn because of my probably glasses too. Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. All right. All right. So hopefully what this is reminding you is top-down processing. Remember, you're using your own knowledge, what you know about the world, to interpret ambiguous items or different things that you see. That's related to what we call Gestalt principles. What Gestalt means is that the overall is greater than each individual sum. We've seen that before in other slides, right? So our brain doesn't just look at what exactly is, like here, which is just rectangular lines with like holes or in the middle. Our brain tries to put this together, like this is one entire shape, right, in a more continuous way. So these are just multiple types of Gestalt principles. The one I just mentioned is closure, so we tend to like close those gaps. You can think of like color by number, I think that's, yeah, like that. There's one for continuity, where we have a tendency to perceive things as continuous and smooth. Similarity, we're grouping things based on similarities. Proximity, we're grouping things based on how close they are to one another. And then the top one is the figure-ground relationship. So we see different things based on what we ascribe as the background and what we ascribe as the foreground. Okay. So there should be two different things that you see in this image here. What are they, if you can't see two things? Yeah.
A goblet and then like two people looking at each other.
Yeah, so if you're looking at that white space, especially if you're ascribing that to like coming forward, that should look like some kind of goblet, some kind of glass to you. And then if you're looking at the black space coming forward, that could look like two faces on the opposite ends there. Okay, so your mind again could switch in between those. All right, this is the last slide. The other one we'll get to in the seminar. But just to say a little bit more about depth perception. So as we see things with our eyes, it's all 2D, right? We are using our brain and our experiences to interpret it as 3D. So that's a great example of perception. Right, so we use cues in our environment to tell us about the depth of something in a 3D world, even though we're only seeing it as 2D. Okay, so our eyes do some wonderful things. I think we already talked about binocular vision, so I won't spend too much time on it there. All right.